The training hall smelled like polished wood and focused crystal residue. Afternoon light slanted through high windows, cutting bright rectangles across the practice floor. Dust motes drifted through the beams like tiny stars. The air was warm from bodies and magic. 23 binders spread across the space in various states of concentration. Master Corwin stood at the front with the detached patience of someone who'd explained this particular technique too many times to count. Gray hair pulled back severe, hands clasped behind her back, voice carrying the flat authority of unquestionable expertise.
Amplification without cleaver support,
she said. Her voice carried to every corner of the hall.
You will pair with another binder. One casts, the other stabilizes and extends the pattern without contributing additional power. The goal is duration, not strength. Control over force. Precision over raw output.
She paused, let the words settle. When she spoke again, her tone sharpened with the weight of practical reality.
Most of you are training for Dyad deployment. Combat partnerships, convergence casting.
She walked along the front of the room, hands still clasped behind her back.
But the Empire's logistics don't support that romanticism. We have 4 binders for every cleaver. The math is simple and brutal. Cleavers are too valuable, too rare to waste on support operations. They deploy to the front, to active threat zones, where convergence matters.
She stopped, surveyed the class with the flat assessment of someone who'd seen too many students fail to grasp reality.
The rest of you will work logistics, fortification, triage, healing, communications networks. And you'll do it without cleaver support because we can't spare them. Logistics gets 1 cleaver for every 20 binders, if you're lucky.
Her voice went colder.
Which means you'll work in teams. Binder-to-binder amplification, reducing ink buildup through cooperative casting. It's not as efficient as convergence, not as natural as proper transfer, but it keeps you functional with the resources we actually have.
She let that sink in. I could feel the shift in the room, the realization settling like cold water.
This skill will save your life more than convergence ever will.
Master Corwin continued.
Most of you will never see frontline deployment. You'll spend your careers in support roles, working with other binders, managing accumulation through techniques exactly like this.
She gestured to the practice space.
So pay attention, because inadequate amplification technique means faster ink buildup. Faster buildup means dissolution. And the Empire doesn't waste resources on binders who can't handle basic logistics.
The silence was absolute now.
You will pair with another binder. One casts, the other stabilizes and extends the pattern without contributing additional power. Begin.
I stood near the back, scanning the room for a partner. Most students had already paired off with people they knew. Training partners they'd worked with before. Friends from other classes. The natural alliances that formed when people spent months together. I looked for Marin, the gorgeous, dangerous woman I'd met in the restricted library. We'd worked well together that night, sharing chairman whiskers and talking about forbidden texts. She'd been easy to be around in a way few people were. I spotted her across the room, already paired with another binder. A tall woman with silver-streaked hair who moved with the same predatory grace Marin did. They were already deep in conversation, hands moving through preliminary pattern discussions. Right. Of course she had regular training partners. I was still figuring out how things worked here. Then someone cleared their throat next to me. I turned. A young woman stood there clutching a leather notebook against her chest like a shield. Small. Maybe 5'2" in her boots. Thin in the way of people who forgot to eat when focused on work. brown hair pulled into a messy bun that was losing its structural integrity. Glasses that kept sliding down her nose. Ink stains on her fingers. Nervous energy radiating from her like heat from a forge. Her eyes were kind. That was the first thing I noticed. Actually kind, not performatively kind. The second thing I noticed was the desperate hope in her expression. The same look I'd seen in Aldrich when he'd apologized for existing. Her voice was barely above a whisper.
Hi, I'm Jessa.
She swallowed, pushed her glasses up her nose with one finger.
I was wondering if you don't already have a partner, which you probably do. Everyone wants to work with you because you're amazing.
I blinked. Amazing? Had she confused me with someone else?
But if you don't,
she continued, words tumbling faster.
Maybe we could. I mean, only if you want to. I understand if you'd rather work with someone more experienced. I'm just a scholarship student, and I know I'm not very good at the practical applications, even though I've read all the theory texts twice, some of them 3 times.
Jessa, I said gently. She stopped, stared at me with wide eyes behind her glasses like I might bite. I don't have a partner, I said. I'd be happy to work with you. Her face transformed. Pure joy spreading across features that had been pinched with anxiety.
Oh, that's really? You're sure? Because I know I'm not very good, and I tend to overcomplicate the geometric patterns, and Master Corwin says I need to stop overthinking everything, but I can't help analyzing the theoretical frameworks and...
Jessa, I kept my voice calm, steady. The same tone I'd used with Father's clients when they spiraled into panic. It's fine. Let's find a practice space before they're all taken. She nodded. Enthusiastic, still clutching her notebook.
Yes. Right, of course, I saw a clear space near the eastern windows. The light is good there, better diffusion for observing thread formation. Unless you prefer different lighting, I can adapt. I'm very adaptable, well, not in combat scenarios. I'm terrible at improvisation under pressure, but for training exercises, I started walking toward the eastern windows. She followed, still talking. The practice space was indeed clear. Good sightlines, adequate room for complex weavings. Jessa set her notebook down with reverent care and immediately opened it to a page covered in meticulous diagrams. Her handwriting was tiny, precise, every line perfect. Margins filled with additional notes in different colored ink. I've been studying amplification theory,
she said, already sketching modifications to Master Corwin's basic pattern.
The standard approach uses parallel threading for stabilization, but I thought maybe if we adjusted the geometric anchors and applied harmonic resonance principles, we could achieve better efficiency. But that's just theoretical. I haven't tested it, and Master Corwin doesn't like when I suggest modifications to established techniques. She says I need to master fundamentals before experimenting, which is completely valid. I understand that, but the theory is so clear about optimization potential and...
She looked up, caught me watching, flushed.
Sorry, I'm talking too much again. My roommate says I need to shut up more.
She pushed her glasses up.
You should probably take the casting role since your power output is higher. I'll stabilize. I'm better at maintenance than generation anyway. More patient with sustained focus.
Show me your pattern first, I said. Jessa blinked.
My pattern?
The modification you were sketching. I want to see it before we start. Her eyes went wide. Hope and terror warring in her expression.
You want to, but it's not proven. It might not work. Master Corwin would say it's unnecessarily complex and...
Jessa. I kept my voice gentle but firm. Show me the pattern. She flipped her notebook around. The diagram was beautiful. intricate. Every line calculated with mathematical precision. I could see the theoretical framework immediately. Harmonic resonance applied to standard amplification geometry, creating sympathetic vibrations that would sustain the weaving with less active maintenance. It was brilliant. Overcomplicated, yes, but brilliant. This would work, I said. Her face lit up.
You think so? Really? Because the geometric reduction creates better flow through the anchor points, and if we align the harmonic frequencies correctly, the resonance should ohm.
She stopped, stared at the pattern.
Oh, that's it. That's the problem. I'm over-engineering the anchor points. If we simplify here...
She grabbed a pencil, started sketching modifications.
And adjust the frequency alignment? Yes, that's cleaner.
I watched her work. The nervous energy channeled into focused precision. Her hand moving across the page with absolute certainty. No hesitation. No doubt. This was where she lived. In theory and calculation and pure mathematical elegance. She reminded me of Aldrich. The same apologetic existence. That reflexive assumption of unworthiness. But where Aldrich accepted his inadequacy, Jessa fought hers through sheer intellectual effort. Studying harder. Reading more. Building elaborate frameworks to compensate for whatever she thought she lacked. I knew that pattern. I'd lived it.
Try casting from this modified structure,
Jessa said, holding out the revised diagram.
I'll maintain the harmonic anchors. If the resonance frequency is correct, you should feel the pattern sustain itself with minimal power drain.
I studied the pattern. Clean, elegant, achievable. We positioned ourselves. Jessa took the stabilization stance, hands already forming the anchor geometry. I gathered ink from my channels. Black oil seeping from my fingertips. Rainbow threads forming. I cast according to her modified framework. The pattern bloomed between us. Geometric shapes linking in perfect harmony. And then, the resonance hit. The weaving sang. Actually sang. A low thrumming that vibrated through my channels like music. The power drain was minimal. Almost nothing. The harmonic frequencies doing exactly what Jessa had predicted. The pattern sustaining itself through pure mathematical elegance. It was beautiful. And I felt nothing. No euphoria. No ecstasy. No pleasure blooming through my channels like liquid fire. Just the tiny trickle of ink expenditure. Mechanical, efficient, clinical. Nothing like touching Dane. Nothing like the transcendent spiral when our magics met. Nothing like the sharp, tactical resonance with Kale that made breathing easier. This was just work. Competent work. Effective work, but empty of anything that made casting feel like living instead of surviving. I understood now why binders working logistics burned out. Why they counted days until their next cleaver rotation. Why amplification was something you endured instead of something you craved. It kept you functional. It kept you alive. But it didn't make you feel anything at all. Jessa's face transformed again. That same pure joy.
Oh, that's so much cleaner. The geometric reduction creates better flow. I see it now.
She was already fumbling for her notebook, maintaining the anchors with one hand while sketching with the other.
Can you show me the hand position again? The way you formed the initial threads? Wait, let me sketch this.
She balanced her notebook on one palm, sketching frantically while maintaining the spell. talking rapidly about optimization potential and theoretical applications. Her earlier nervousness forgotten completely in the excitement of discovery. We held the pattern for 3 minutes, far longer than standard amplification. When we finally released it, the threads dissolved gracefully. Perfect dissipation. Zero feedback. Master Corwin appeared beside us. I hadn't noticed her approaching. Her expression was carefully neutral, but I caught the flicker of approval in her eyes as she studied Jessa's notebook.
Interesting approach, Miss Cheyan,
She said.
Unconventional, but mathematically sound.
She glanced at me.
Good execution, Miss Harrow. Continue.
She moved to the next pair. Jessa stared after her with wide eyes.
She said it was mathematically sound.
She whispered. Reverent. Like she'd just granted her greatest wish.
Did you hear that? She didn't say I was overcomplicating. She said mathematically sound.
It was a good pattern, I said.
It wouldn't have worked without your execution.
She was already sketching modifications in her notebook.
The thread formation was perfect, textbook precision. I've never seen anyone maintain such clean geometric integrity during initial casting. Can we try again? I want to test if we can extend the duration even further by adjusting the harmonic frequency. Just a small modification, very small, barely noticeable. Unless you'd rather practice the standard technique, that's completely valid. I know I'm being presumptuous, suggesting we deviate from Master Corwin's curriculum and
Show me the modification, I said. We spent the next hour testing Jessa's variations. Each iteration more refined than the last. She talked constantly, explaining theoretical frameworks, citing obscure texts, apologizing for talking too much, then immediately launching into another explanation because she couldn't help herself. I didn't mind. Her enthusiasm was genuine, infectious, and beneath the self-deprecation was real competence. She knew theory better than anyone I'd trained with. Could explain complex concepts with absolute clarity once she stopped apologizing for existing. But I also watched, really watched, the amplification technique repeated over and over. The threads wove together in precise geometric configurations. The pattern stabilized itself with almost no input from either of us. Like a house of cards where every piece interlocked perfectly. In that one specific configuration, it was stable. Self-sustaining, but fragile. The tiniest deviation and it would collapse entirely. Our ink input wasn't power. It was correction. Small adjustments to counteract the magical turbulence that threatened stability. Like bracing a house of cards against invisible breezes. And that's where I noticed it, just for the briefest moment. A tiny mote of silver light. Ash. Caught in the weaving where no ash should exist. I would have missed it completely if Jessa's recommended lighting hadn't hit it exactly right. The afternoon sun through eastern windows, creating the perfect angle to catch something so small it barely registered as real. I stopped the weave. Can we cast again? Jessa blinked.
Of course, did something go wrong? The pattern felt stable to me, but maybe the harmonic frequency needs adjustment and...
It was stable. I just want to observe something. She nodded, positioned herself. We cast again. This time I watched that specific space. The exact point where I'd seen the mote before. The weaving formed, threads interlocking, pattern stabilizing, and there, just as the configuration locked into place, that tiny silver spark. Ash drawn into the structure like iron filings to a magnet. It didn't come from us. I was certain of that. Neither of us were cleavers. Neither of us produced ash. It came from somewhere else, drawn into the weaving from ambient magic, from the world itself, just enough to stabilize the pattern, to create that perfect balance where the structure could sustain itself. Kale's theories crashed through my mind. His words about synthesis, about how every binder carried a mote of ash, every cleaver carried a mote of ink. Opposing magics existing in trace amounts, creating potential for resonance. But this wasn't internal. This was external. Ash existing in the world, available, waiting to be called. My heart was racing. This meant something important. The amplification technique worked because it drew in the opposite aspect, creating microconvergence. Synthesis on a scale so small it was almost invisible. But it was there. Synthesis, I whispered. Jessa's eyebrow raised. She opened her mouth to speak.
Enough.
Master Corwin's voice cut across the training hall. Sharp, final.
Class dismissed.
When Master Corwin finally dismissed the class, Jessa gathered her things with nervous efficiency, clutching her notebook, pushing her glasses up, starting to say something, then stopping. Starting again.
Thank you
She finally managed.
for partnering with me. I know I talk too much and overcomplicate everything and probably annoyed you with all the theoretical tangents, but thank you for actually listening, for trying my patterns instead of just telling me to follow the standard curriculum.
You're good at this, I said. She blushed.
I'm really not. I mean, theoretically, yes, but practical application is where I always fail, and
Jessa, I waited until she looked at me. You're good at this. The theory matters. The precision matters. Don't apologize for being competent. She stared at me like I'd spoken a different language, then nodded. Small, uncertain, but hopeful. We walked back to the residential hall together. Jessa chattering about obscure magical theory and apologizing every few sentences.
sorry, I'm probably boring you. I know I talk too much about theory. My roommate says I need to shut up more.
And I found myself smiling despite everything. It was strange. Having someone genuinely want my company without ulterior motive, without calculation or political positioning, just honest enthusiasm and nervous energy, and the desperate hope that I might actually like her. I did like her. That was the problem. Or maybe not a problem. Maybe just unexpected. That evening, someone knocked on my door. I opened it to find Jessa standing in the hallway, wringing her hands. She'd changed from training clothes into a simple shirt and trousers. Still had ink stains on her fingers. Still looked nervous, but determined.
You mentioned synthesis theory earlier in class, and I found these in the archive.
She held out a stack of books. Heavy leather-bound volumes with titles in old script.
They might be completely useless, probably are useless actually, but I thought maybe if you have time, you don't have to read them if you don't want to. I know you're busy, and these are probably irrelevant to whatever you're actually researching, and
I took the books. The top one was titled Harmonic Resonance in Dual Aspect Casting. The second, Theoretical Frameworks for Convergence Optimization. The third, Historical Analysis of Synthesis Techniques. Pre-collapse applications. These weren't useless. These were exactly what I needed. Thank you, I said. Jessa beamed.
Oh, good. I wasn't sure if, synthesis theory is so rare and most of the texts are fragmentary at best, but these ones seemed more complete, relatively speaking, though the translation quality is questionable in places. And
She stopped, took a breath.
would you want to? If you're not busy, we could maybe discuss them together. I've read through the first one twice, and I have some questions about the geometric frameworks that don't quite align with modern binding theory, but maybe that's intentional, or maybe the translation is wrong. I'm not sure, and
Come in, I said. She followed me inside, still nervous, still clutching another notebook she'd brought. But her eyes were bright with genuine excitement. We spent 3 hours discussing theoretical applications. Jessa took meticulous notes, asked questions that were actually insightful beneath the self-effacing delivery, explained concepts I'd been struggling with using clear frameworks and mathematical precision. She was brilliant, absolutely brilliant, hidden under layers of anxiety and self-doubt, but brilliant nonetheless. When she finally left, apologizing again for staying too long, I sat with the books she'd brought and tried to process what just happened. I'd made a friend, not a political alliance, not a strategic partnership. A friend. Someone who liked me for reasons that had nothing to do with my power or potential usefulness. Who wanted to spend time with me because we enjoyed similar things. It felt strange, foreign, like wearing clothes that didn't quite fit but might eventually settle into comfort. I opened the first book and started reading. Jessa's neat annotations filled the margins. Questions, observations, theoretical extensions. Her mind working through problems with the same relentless precision she brought to everything. The text discussed harmonic resonance between opposing magical aspects. How certain frequencies could create sympathetic vibrations. How cleaving and binding might synchronize at specific wavelengths. How synthesis might not be about forcing two magics together, but finding the natural frequency where they already wanted to meet. I thought about Dane, about how our magic spiraled together with transcendent ease, about the way his ash soothed my chaos and my ink loosened his rigid control. That perfect balance we'd found. And I thought about Kale, about how his magic felt different but equally resonant, sharper, more tactical, but still harmonious in ways I couldn't quite explain. Two different frequencies, both creating sympathetic vibrations. Jessa's theoretical framework suggested that wasn't impossible. That multiple resonance points could exist. That harmony wasn't exclusive. I closed the book, tried not to think about what that meant, tried not to think about wanting things I shouldn't want. Failed. My hand trembled as I set the book down. Just a slight tremor. The same shake I'd noticed earlier. Getting worse. And there. That phantom itching on my feet. The same sensation from days ago. Spreading now. Crawling up my ankles like invisible insects. I pressed my palms flat against the desk. Tried to still the shaking through pure will. It didn't work. The restlessness was building in my core. A tightness that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with absence. My channels knew what they were missing, knew the difference between Jessa's clinical amplification and real transfer, between mechanical efficiency and euphoric resonance. They wanted more. I wanted more. The guilt hit immediately. Sharp. Cutting. I shouldn't be craving this. Shouldn't be sitting here thinking about ash flowing through my channels like liquid pleasure. About magic spiraling into transcendence. About that moment when reality simplified into pure sensation. About Dane's ash, or Kale's, or anyone's. I didn't even know which one I wanted. Couldn't untangle the need from the specific person. Just knew my body was screaming for something it couldn't have. Something I'd rationed myself away from. Something that made the amplification technique feel like starvation rations after feasting. The shaking spread to my other hand. I watched my fingers tremble against the dark wood. Tried to focus on the text. On harmonic frequencies and geometric frameworks. On problems that could be solved through mathematics and precision. Problems that had clear answers instead of messy complications. Problems that didn't require me to acknowledge what I wanted versus what I should want. The text blurred. The words wouldn't stay still. My channels pulsed with phantom sensation. Memory of pleasure I couldn't access. Withdrawal making itself known in tremors, and itching, and restlessness that made sitting still feel impossible. I forced myself to keep reading anyway. Outside my window, the academy grounds settled into evening quiet. Students returning to their rooms. Lights flickering on in windows. The normal rhythm of institutional life. I sat in the growing darkness and tried to tell myself that making a friend was simple. Uncomplicated. Just a nice thing that happened. But nothing was simple anymore. Not when every connection felt weighted with meaning I couldn't quite parse. Not when my channels craved transfer with an intensity that scared me. Not when 6 months stretched ahead like an eternity of careful rationing and inadequate substitutes. Not when I couldn't stop thinking about Dane crystallizing alone while I learned tactical knowledge from a man whose presence made breathing easier. Whose ash might soothe this restlessness if I let it. If I admitted I wanted it, the guilt and craving tangled together until I couldn't separate them. Shouldn't want this. Needed it anyway. Shouldn't think about Kale's transfer. Couldn't stop imagining it. Shouldn't be sitting here shaking with withdrawal while Dane suffered alone. But I was. I opened Jessa's book again. Focused on the text with desperate intensity. On harmonic frequencies. On problems that had solutions. On anything except the tremor in my hands, or the phantom itching spreading up my calves, or the restlessness building in my core like pressure with no release. Outside, darkness settled over Thornhaven. Inside, I sat alone with books and theories, and the careful distance I was learning to maintain between feeling and function. It wasn't working. The withdrawal was getting worse. The need building like a tide I couldn't hold back. But I kept trying. What else could I do?